This video is attempting to answer one of the most stupid questions I've ever thought of, but as soon as it popped into my head, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I needed to know. Can I replace my laptop with an iPad mini? Surely not. Right? Well folks, I finally did it. I've sold my iPad Pro, it's up on eBay, and it's going to be off to the highest bidder pretty soon. I've decided to jump in with both feet into iPad mini life, and that brings with it some interesting questions when you're out and about with this little thing, such as how much could the average person actually get done in an average day if all they had was this, with maybe some accessories and a phone. My suspicion going into this was actually not that much, but having done this for almost 72 hours this week, the results were pretty surprising. Now before we get into my experience though, let's look at the hard facts behind this showdown. My MacBook Pro weighs in with the latest Mac OS, the M1 Max chip, 64GB of memory, 4TB of storage, a 10-core CPU, 24-core GPU with a built-in 14-inch Liquid Retina XDR screen, not to mention ports galore and a full-size backlit keyboard and a Force Touch trackpad. This thing is an absolute powerhouse. I use it to run 3 businesses, including all the content for this channel, and since I bought it in 2021, it hasn't stuttered at anything I've ever thrown at it. My iPad mini, on the other hand, is running iPad OS 18. It's got the A17 Pro chip, the 8GB of memory, 256GB of storage, a 6-core CPU and a 5-core GPU with an 8-inch Liquid Retina 60Hz display, plus a single USB-C port. Now, even just looking at those stats, you don't even need to know what they mean to tell you that this almost doesn't look fair, does it? On paper, my MacBook and pretty much any modern laptop should wipe the floor with this iPad mini. So, what's the catch? Well, it turns out that the iPad mini has more than a few tricks up its sleeve that the Mac just can't compete with. And while we're still in specs land, let's look a little bit more closely at those screens. Now, a lot has been made of the iPad mini screen and the fact that it's still not OLED and it's still only 60Hz. I've talked about this a number of times in other videos, and although I do understand that some people just can't look at it, it just doesn't bother me at all. What is interesting is if you look at the pixels per inch or the PPI numbers. Now, talking about PPI is a bit like toilet paper. A high PPI is like that luxurious, thick, quilted stuff that's buttery smooth and feels almost seamless on your hands. A low PPI is like that see-through single ply stuff in public toilets that always leave you questioning your life choices. My MacBook has 254 pixels per inch. The iPad mini, on the other hand, has 326 pixels per inch. It's actually one of the highest pixel densities of any Apple product, which is kind of wild. And what that means is that if you're looking at this content on this screen, and this screen alone, you're likely to have a pretty nice experience without being able to spot individual pixels on the display. Just don't wipe your bum with it, because trust me, that's a really bad idea. Some of you might have seen that I ran a little poll on this topic on my community page earlier this week, and the results kind of surprised me. Less than half the people who voted were convinced that a laptop was the only way to go, with the others kind of split between an iPad replacement being a one-day thing or that it was already a viable replacement. Some of the commenters, like Matthew here, were already saying that as a college professor, he uses it to teach and he's already using it as his primary device. So let's dig into that. What would it take to make this your primary device? If we take this first group of people who are saying, this is good, it's already good enough for a laptop replacement, I suspect this will mean you're only very light computer users who might be using it kind of as a replacement for a phone. After all, you can buy this with an eSIM, and if you use a service like Google Voice, you can set up a number that people can call you on using this device, or pretty much any device. It's pretty cool. And though the iPad mini doesn't have an earpiece, you can still make and take calls privately by plugging in a wired headset or using something like AirPods. In all likelihood though, I think there's a strong argument for sitting in the maybe camp here. After testing this setup out this week, I can confirm that this can work, but just down to the physical constraints of having a tiny screen and this form factor, yeah, you're gonna be needing some accessories to get everyday computing stuff done. Firstly, a simple USB hub will be pretty essential. If you want to connect up anything other than one device at a time, you are going to need one of these. Especially if you're moving around large files that are too big for something like AirDrop, you can just pop in a memory stick or an SSD and yeah, you're all good. Also, you'll probably want to consider a battery pack. The battery in my MacBook can last most of the day with average use, whereas the downside of the iPad mini is that the battery is also pretty mini. I'm really lucky if I get a full day out of this without needing to recharge at some point. Now, battery banks are everywhere these days, but at the moment I'm rocking this one from Aohi. Let's go with that, Aohi, which can charge up to 3 devices quite happily and keep this iPad topped up several times over. By the way, iPad mini is great for traveling with, but if you're doing lots of airline travel, just keep a watch out for those battery banks because some airlines will not let you carry over certain capacities, but yeah, this one will be fine to travel with. You're also going to want the Apple Pencil, a bit more on that coming up later. I would also recommend buying a portable keyboard and mouse. There's tons to choose from, so if you like something that is just as portable, there is this folding number from Sodi, and that gives you more of a MacBook-like keyboard with a trackpad and also a number pad built into it. Or if you're into your creamy mechanical keyboard vibes, the Newfie Air 75 in this folio case is a great choice, and it doubles up as a stand for your iPad mini too. And optionally, you might also want to look at a portable display just for when you need that extra screen space. I've tested these before in the past, but I know what you're thinking. Once you've bought all of this stuff, it's actually not as portable as a laptop, and you'd be absolutely right. What I'm envisaging is the kind of remote worker who can get most things done with a setup like this using the foldable keyboard and then rock up at a co-working space, plug into a monitor and do a bunch more stuff before going home. You're not going to get the nice full extended experience that you'll get with an iPad Air or an iPad Pro, but sadly that's just the trade-off for this tiny size. Now, the iPad mini can actually AirPlay onto a compatible monitor like this one from LG, so you can use it without even being wired in with very low latency, and also you can keep that port freed up for other stuff. Pretty cool. Now, I don't think I need to go through all the things that my laptop can do that the iPad can't, because yeah, that's going to be a very long list, and I kind of covered it on a previous video. What I haven't looked at are all the things that I can do with this iPad mini that are actually very difficult to do on a laptop, if not impossible. And to explain that, yeah, I need to go back to the toilet. The iPad mini is so portable that you can have it with you pretty much anywhere. And that means if you want to be sending that quick email off while you drop the kids off at the pool, you know what I mean, then you absolutely can. Very, very difficult and hazardous to do that with a laptop, although I'm sure some of you lot who work from home have probably tried it at some point. Yeah, you know who you are. Got your webcam disabled on the Teams call, I've seen you. Next up, whilst my MacBook has got a built-in webcam, it doesn't let me take photos. My iPad mini has a front-facing 12 megapixel webcam that I can use for taking selfies or calls, and that has that fancy center stage feature that keeps you in focus if you want to move around while you're on the call. And it's got another 12 megapixel camera on the back that can take 4K video and also pretty decent photos too. In fact, one of my top uses for this camera is as a document scanner. It works brilliantly. I can't do that on the Mac without some kind of printer attached. Now, this next one might seem obvious, but the iPad has got 3 ways that you can interact with it. There's touch control, of course, with all the different gestures and shortcuts. And the iPad also allows you to pair it with a keyboard and a mouse, so it's a double threat. Oh, and there's the Apple Pencil too. That's a triple threat, which is an extra purchase, of course, but it does let me take notes, make sketches, sign contracts, and also mark up documents. It's great. If I was about to go into college or university and I was wondering what to buy to support my studies, I would go with an iPad over a MacBook every day of the week, because having all these different forms of input is a brilliant way to cover all bases when you're studying. You can capture notes and convert them to text, type up assignments, record lectures and seminars, keep in touch with all your social networks and messages. It's just so versatile, considering it's something that you can fit in your pocket. In fact, I remember watching the second Iron Man film back in 2010, and there was this scene where Tony Stark had this little handheld device that he was able to hold one-handed and hack into the TVs in the courtroom. So 15 years ago, that was science fiction fantasy, but to me, this is getting very close to being able to do a lot of that sort of stuff. It's a powerful computer that you can fit in your hand. It lets me do everyday computing tasks, and it also lets me hold it one-handed to read books, magazines, play games, and watch content. It's probably the most versatile device that I own. And if you look at those applications as a whole, it's way more versatile than my MacBook, and I challenge you to convince me otherwise. Now, with all that being said, I'm not gonna lie, coming back to my laptop after a few days only using my iPad mini gave me Pretty mixed feelings. On one hand, I was relieved to be able to finally do split screen apps in a way that I wanted to and manage files in a relatively normal way and just live in Mac OS again. But on the other, I miss the simple focus that the iPad mini offers. iPad OS makes it so hard to run multiple apps at a time that I'd gotten into this really nice rhythm of just getting one thing done at a time, which actually helped me stay really productive. It seems counterintuitive, but I spent 3 days getting all my everyday work done, and there were only a handful of times when this thing slowed me down. So yeah, sometimes smaller is better, as I keep telling my wife. Well, what do you think then, folks? What would it take to make you trade up a full desktop experience to go iPad only or even iPad mini only? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, you will love my wider look at who should buy a MacBook or an iPad. It's right over here when you're ready. See you next time.